excited that many of you are here, and I have two giants in higher education and also workforce that I am so happy to have this conversation about just topics around the title, We Wear the Mask Champions for Social Justice. This is the second session for this year, and we have one more session in March that is celebrating the amazing works of women throughout the city of New York and abroad. So this particular session really asks the question, how do persons of color lead and thrive in the 21st century? But also, how do we respond to current and political environment from an equity lens within their respective works, with an intentional focus on workforce and educational initiatives? So I have the awesome opportunity to have, again, two giants in education, higher education, and also workforce. And I will introduce our first speaker, who's become a real fast friend and colleague, and that's Ms. Marjorie Parker. Ms. Parker is the CEO of JobsFirstNYC. It is a New York nonprofit intermediary that creates solutions to break down barriers and transform systems supporting young adults and their communities in the pursuit of economic opportunities. Marjorie has been in this field of supporting adult and youth service for more than 25 years as a consultant and working with nonprofit organizations. Prior to working with Jobs First NYC, she was the Deputy Executive Director for Programs of Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow. She's held positions with the CUNY Research Foundation of the City University of New York, the Department of Youth and Community Development, and she is the current board chair of Reconnect NYC and is a member of the South Bronx Rising Together Leadership Council. Most recently, Ms. Parker was recognized as one of the 2023 Crain's list of notable Black leaders. So we certainly want to congratulate you on that, Marjorie, and welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Our next speaker is Dr. President Anthony Munroe. He is the president of the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and he has galvanized college-wide initiatives to build equity and inclusion, enhance retention and graduation rates, and support students' basic needs and increase their academic and career opportunities. One of his first actions as the president of BMCC was to create the Race, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, and he's also established the President's Fund for Excellence and Innovation. He serves on a number of boards, one including the Society of College and University Planning, a consortium of community colleges and community and technical colleges are part of this group. He also serves with HETS, which is the Hispanic Educational Technology Services, and on the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, and on the Commission for Student Success at the American Association of Community Colleges, also known as AACC. He was named in 2022 as a power player in education by Politics NY, and he's also received a Heritage Award in 2022 from the Consulate General of Jamaica. And in 2020, he was the awarded the Paragon Award for new presidents from Phi Theta Kappa Honorary Society. Dr. Munroe, welcome. Welcome also to Marjorie Parker. And most importantly, he's a good friend and colleague, and so happy to serve with him. He's a former president as well of Essex County College in New Jersey and Malcolm X College of the City Colleges of Chicago. Wow, two phenomenal leaders. I'm just humbled to just be in their presence. I mean, so everyone that's here, if you can just join me virtually and just celebrating these two champions that we're preparing to talk to today. So as I thought about what is this conversation about, why now and why in this moment? So much is happening nationally. A lot is happening throughout New York State and also New York City. So one of the aspects of the work that I love is that my major was English literature. So I've grown a passion and a love for just poetry. So I thought about what better way to pin this conversation is by the words of Paul Laurence Dunbar. All right, and he talks about wearing this mask, and that's how I want to begin our conversation. And my first question will be to both Marjorie and to Tony. And the question is, We wear the mask, it's the words penned by Lawrence Dunbar, that grinds and lies. It hides our cheeks and it shades our eyes. So as you think about we wear the mask, again, that grins and lies, it hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. In reflection of your leadership journey, how has Dunbar's prose shaped your understanding of the world and your values? And we will start with Marjorie.
Thank you, Larry, for also quoting Paul Laurence Dunbar here. I appreciate the invitation to this conversation, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to elevate voices across the field and voices of people across the African diaspora. I was born in Jamaica, the little island, my little island of Jamaica. And I grew up, I lived there until I was around 16. And everywhere I looked, people of color were in leadership position. I go to my doctor was Black, but my teachers were primarily Black. And so I grew up in a place where I saw a lot of leaders who looked like me. And so, in my, moving to the United States and growing up here, I began, that experience aligned with the new one I was having here in the US, which really, I remember being young, often wondering what Black people were they talking about, was often the question of our house, was like, what Black people are they talking about? Because in our experience, Black people were successful. Black people could do all kinds of things. And I think that, in my development here, and my growth in leadership, it didn't have imposter syndrome in terms of being a Black person or being a woman. I more asked questions, I think, that were more common to leaders, as in, am I ready for this position? Do I have what it takes to do this job? I don't know if it's necessarily a woman thing or a Black thing, or more like people who ascend to different leadership positions. And that, I think those are good questions to ask yourself. What would likely to happen in the journey of leadership is often people asking or telling you to do things who have far less experience than you, people who question your directives. People sometimes clearly behave as if you should not be in that position on no other reason than maybe you're a woman, or maybe you're Black. But never really, in my experience, and in my personal journey, on my qualification. But mostly on those things. So I think that, as a leader of color and a leader from the African diaspora, I really try to focus on, what strategies I need to engage to make sure that I'm always centered in my approach and in my work and in how I engage with others. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Same question to Tony.
First of all, Dr. J, thank you so much for your leadership and for your being such a strong and vocal student advocate and role model. I'm truly honored and humbled to be here today. And to Ms. Parker, thank you for all that you do in my hometown of the Bronx, where I'm from. But my family too is from the Caribbean, in fact, from Jamaica and Panama and other places. So culturally, I think we share a lot in common. And in response to your very thought-provoking and profound question, Dr. J, the literary expert, I'll offer the following. being a leader is truly an honor. What I do is my ministry. It's my calling. It's not for the paycheck. It's not for the title. It's not for the reputation, but it is for the ability to have an impact, a very positive one, on the lives of many. You see, my personal journey is not one of that you would expect as the typical, you go to high school, go to 4 years of college, and go through various educational institutions. That's good, that's fine, and if you can do that, I encourage it. It took 14 years for me to finish my undergraduate degree. Went to about 10, 11, 12 different undergraduate colleges. Was even put on academic probation and told, get your act together before you think about coming back to this institution. So I come at this from a very different perspective. One who performed exceptionally well in the New York City public schools. But for financial reasons, lack of access, lack of resources, could not go to my number one choice school, which was Columbia University, which I was accepted to. So I think it's very important that we recognize as leaders that there's a time and place for reacting and responding. And I can give a very specific example. In one of my leadership roles, I was in a meeting with, at that time, my supervisor. And that person really wanted me to shut down a very, very important public health program that was benefiting primarily teenage girls of color. And he referenced that program as the Tar Baby. I was beyond shocked, was very disappointed, because I always envisioned this person as very broad-minded, inclusive, etc. But he made that statement as if it was something of great ease. But I learned through that experience that there's a time and place to respond. So when you talk about wearing the mask and grinning, I had to do that in that moment, because my reaction would not have been one that would have been very productive. I'm just being very transparent. The marginalization of students and professionals, particularly those of color, for a number of reasons, continue to perpetuate in our communities. Majority communities have 9 to 10 times as much wealth as the Black community here in these United States of America. So we're very focused on ensuring that we align our programs to meet our students where they are, recognizing that they all have grit and determination and ability to perform and to do well. I think it's very important to stay in touch with our students, to understand what their needs and their expectations, their hopes, their dreams, and their aspirations are, and that we respond by creating the programs that will put them on, for some, pathways out of poverty, and for all, pathways to prosperity.
Thank you. And I want to build upon that, President Munroe or Tony. I'll go back and forth. But the work that you're doing, Marjorie, Ms. Parker, is so vital to what Tony just mentioned. And when I think about, the research and around the disproportionality of, persons of color, the direct correlation between those who have and don't have and how it impacts them emotionally and physically, can you speak to just that moment in terms of how is the work that you're leading with Jobs First NYC. How is that, research that you've read, you are the intermediary, you understand very clearly about that direct correlation to one's emotional and physical well-being. How is Jobs First helping to bolster, the narrative, but also not only the narrative, but providing the just-in-time resources and access to, very similar to Tony's clarion call for why he does the work that he does? How do organizations like yours really help to manifest that work?
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Anthony, who just went on camera, for for your reflection on your journey as a leader of color. We know, I'm Larry, I'm going to we'll answer your question in a minute, but that a sense of belonging is important to how you will experience your journey as a leader, or experience your journey as a person of African heritage in this country. And I think one thing that we are beginning to see is this conversation around what it means to belong, and how does that show up in how we engage with young people in our work, and what are young people telling us about how they're feeling about belonging. And when they talk about belonging, they're talking about two things, right? They're talking about sovereignty over self, and they're also talking about belonging in any of the places where they show up, that they're not an anomaly, that no one expects that they wouldn't show up in those places, that it's a norm, right? It's normal to see me as a leader of an institution, or to see me as a doctor, or to see me as an educator, or to see me as the president of Guttman. Those are norms, so that when we do show up in those places, it doesn't become like a special recognition. It's the we make a lot of fuss when we see Black people who are Rhodes Scholars. Well, it's an honor to be a scholar, but it shouldn't be an extra special thing because you're Black. You can't do that because you're Black. You can't do that because you're White. You can do that because you can do that from any group. And those things should not be seen. It should be seen as special, but they shouldn't be seen as things that are normal, right? And so that's what young people tell us about belonging and sovereignty, right? That it's the things that we give accolades and specialty to should not be seen that way, but should be seen as norm. In our JobsFirstNYC, for the last 16 years, we've really been working on economic opportunities and mobility for young people. We're primarily focused across 18 communities here in New York City. And, in the COVID impacted job market that we're still in, we're right now, what we're trying to learn is, what's this new dynamic between the current labor market and how workers now respond to work. And in that, I mean, we're no stranger to all the headlines proclaiming that labor shortage and worker shortage is creating a challenge for employers. But we believe that there are a few things that's happening. Workers are, for the first time, exercising the types of choices they can make, and they're empowered to do so. The traditional 9-to-5 environment are not necessarily attractive to many younger workers who want more flexibility and also seek higher wages, right? So, and higher than minimum wages. I mean, a side story here, but I recently talked to the Coney Island folks out here in Brooklyn who shared with us that they were looking for over 1,000 workers and that they couldn't find workers. So my first question really was, well, how much are you paying? And they said, well, we're paying above minimum wage. A lot of those positions are paying $22 an hour, and they still couldn't find workers, right? Because in this case, I think it's not the money, it's the flexibility that people are looking for that it doesn't allow them to have. We're also learning that, Larry, that we need to prioritize skills and understand how they're transferable across changing employment sectors. Some jobs are going away, but those skills aren't going away. We have to determine where those skills transfer to. Something that we are having a lot of conversations around, and we've just done some deep dive research around, is how is social media impacting people's decision about when they leave home to work or to go to school. A lot of young people have monetized their social media, and they have structured time around when they do some of that work. Many young people are living at home as well with their families, and they have less demand for higher wages because they're not paying as many bills as they need to, and there's not a lot of pressure on them to move out. So these are some of the things that we are learning. We're also learning across New York City that there are now neighborhoods that have high numbers of young people who are out of work and out of school that have never showed up in our research the last 16 years, and then 4 years prior to before we were launched. So neighborhoods, there's 7 or 8 new neighborhoods in Queens that are now have high rates of young people are unemployed and not in school. And so those are the kind of COVID impacted that we're seeing along in terms of just our general research that we're doing. And we have a report coming out in about another month that look at some of the early impacts and we don't call it the post-pandemic, we call it the pandemic impacted job market, because we're not sure if we're post-pandemic yet. But one other thing that we're also observing, Larry, like workforce programs, for example, we're seeing more hybrid and remote training and education. And these are some shifts towards developing a more strong hybrid training and education schedules. There are people who are unwilling to show up in person 5 days a week to a physical building anymore. And, that's for many reasons. And hybrid, presents the potential to reach more people in places with limited access to high skills training and education. For example, we may now have the resource. There are people that may not have the resources for transportation, or family obligation requires them to stay close to home. And so, organizations like yours, like Guttman, that may partner with an organization in, say, Brownsville, New York, may provide someone in Brownsville access to education in a way that they wouldn't have it before, because they couldn't physically come up to your location. But you're now partnered with a community partner that has a physical location in the community, and you can deliver your education and training services there. So we're seeing more of that now, and communities are really happy about that. We're also seeing more skills-based hiring and a focus on skills-based hiring. And this shift is really promising for younger workers often, and for more experienced, mature workers who may have been working for a long time in a job, but they don't have a college degree, for example. So even though their skills qualify them for the job, the benchmark for that job is a college degree, and they don't have that. And so we're seeing some shift towards that. The other two things that we're seeing here at JobsFirst is this moment that a lot of the country is really focused on how do we map skills, and how do we map skills across sectors so that we can have job seekers understand the currency of their skills and where those skills translate across the marketplace. And JobsFirst is partnering with workforce AI leader SkyHigh to bring skills mapping technology to enhance workforce development and job access across New York City. And we're going beyond the traditional job seekers. What we're doing is we're mapping entire neighborhoods. So imagine, right, that if you can build a reskilling and an upskilling plan for an entire neighborhood, one that showcases the skills currency of that community to its residents, so that they understand what skills exist in that community, and then build upon their unique strength, right? So if you're a community where most of your workers are in the lower end of healthcare, well, we need to understand that you have most of your workers in lower end of healthcare. We need to understand what skills they have, and then we need to ask that next question: could we provide the type of upskilling training to folks in this neighborhood that would help them get to that next job, the one that pays more money? My dad always told me when I was fussing with him, goes, the simple way to solve poverty is that everybody must make more money. It's a fact. If you have more money, you're not going to be in poverty, right? And so it's that's what skills mapping is about. And there's a focus now, as you've seen, that the mayor is focused on apprenticeship. He stated that he wants New York City to be the apprenticeship city. It's the place you're going to go to learn about apprenticeship. I am personally happy to see this pivot to focus on vocational skills training. And that in the 80s, we told everybody that they have to go to college because the future of work was knowledge, was a knowledge industry. I think it still is, but I think we need a combination of the type of skills that we're training on hands-on work that we're moving away from. Because we still have a lot of people in America that want to be electricians and plumbers and carpenters. And it may require some different skills, but you can't outsource those jobs. And so we need to figure out how we train people up for those and then ensure that, to your question at the top about, that they're paying better, right? People simply need to make more money to live a better financial life and a better economic life. That is, now stop there.
You know, I love that, and I know that both President Munroe and I, you know, as we sit in different circles and we're having these conversations about, you know, enrollment increases, and that's good. But for me, I always think about the equity lens. How are we providing the just-in-time credentials, be it a micro credential, be it a certificate, be it an AS degree that will allow people to get to work? So I to hear you say, you know, confirm what we know is really the next phase for how community colleges should be thinking about this new normal, as people are thinking about it in terms of workforce, is certainly refreshing. So President Munroe, you know, as I think about your pathway and you begin to talk about that, you know, and I'm really interested in just, you know, you've had different roles. You know, I know you as you know, higher ed president, but you've also served as a medical administrator. And it's interesting. You've gone from a medical administrator overseeing $200+ million over hospitals, and then you chose to be a college president, a noble position, right? But what was the motivation behind each one of those pathways?
Thank you for that. As I reflect, I think for me, it goes back to my maternal grandfather who came to this country. He was born in Panama, raised in Jamaica, came to this country in the early 60s, eventually bought a house in the Bronx, Northeast Bronx, where I spent my formative years. And he would go to work in a suit and tie with his briefcase that had his lunch in it to wash dishes at Doctor's Hospital. And he worked hard to bring all 13 of his children to this country. And he would say to me, he called me son, he would say to me, "You're going to become a doctor. You're going to become a doctor." He planted those seeds. I didn't know what that meant at, you know, those young, tender years. But I saw how he worked hard, he provided for his family, and he always had, and my grandparents always had, a sense of community and caring. You came to the house, you were fed well, you were taken care of, you were taken in. And then I look at my mother, who, when she came to this country, she went to nursing school and became a nurse and cared for, with deep passion, her patients. And those were my early impressions and motivations for going into healthcare. I started my healthcare career or calling at Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York, and worked in a number of different institutions, from public health to not-for-profit, faith-based healthcare systems, and ultimately became president of 3 hospitals over a 20+ year span. mentors along the way help guide me and instill upon me the basic principles of exceptional leadership, one of which is the late 34, who was the first Black male that I saw in healthcare in a significant leadership position. Outside of human resources or housekeeping or buildings and grounds, you could find people of color in supervisory and director positions in those type of job categories, but in administration, in finance, in IT, in clinical services, not so much. So that influenced my orientation and my desire to diversify to the extent that I can healthcare. Marjorie, you mentioned how in Jamaica all the leaders were people of color, right? We don't see that as much in many of our communities. So I was actually recruited, Dr. J, to work for a very large medical school as an associate vice president and associate dean. And that's when I got introduced to higher education as my, if you want to call it, my second career or my second calling. Yet still helping people, but helping people through education, maximizing their greatest potential, developing their skills, realizing their hopes and their dreams through training, through upskilling, through education, through various programs that we have available. So that is what I'll offer as my reflection on your question, and it goes back to my roots. With my family, and it hasn't always been easy. Many times I was the only one. In fact, when I was the administrator for radiation oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, I believe I was the only minority male or Black male of significant leadership role at Sloan Kettering. I think things are starting to change, but they need to change at a much more intentional, faster, deeper, broader way and rate.
So in the spirit of change, and you gave a great pivot to this question for Marjorie, I was reading this recent article in Forbes by Holly Corbett entitled, "How Women of Color Are Changing What Leadership Looks Like." And according to Corbett, by 2060, 1 in 5 Americans will be a woman of color. And women of color will be the majority of all women in America by 2060. Think about that. Can you speak to the gravity of that premise? And additionally, provide some examples around how we should ready ourselves for this shift.
I saw that question, Larry, when you sent it to me, and I started smiling because it is, there are 20% of the women in leadership, in New York City are women of color across nonprofit. And we consider that few, given the population distribution across New York City. I think I'm going to speak a little bit from personal experience here as a woman of color. I think as we, in March, I'll be sharing a brief report that I wrote on succession planning here at Jobs First, but the transition of a woman into a leadership position here. Now what I do is documented that experience to the best of my ability from top to bottom, and supplemented that with conversations with about 30 women leaders from across the field, and they were diverse women, to talk about more about the woman experience as we across the sector, regardless of race. Women are now taking the lead in a lot of institutions in ways that we hadn't seen it previously. So from my experience as a person of color, the first thing I really learned to not do was to not take on things that they weren't my things. My job isn't to solve everybody's problem. My job isn't to be the expert at every issue as it relates to a woman of color, immigrant woman, whatever category people put me in. Not my job to educate people about all those things. I think often as women of color, we feel some pressure always to be better than, to the joke in Black families that you need to have like 2 or 3 degrees. Well, at work, it seems like you need to have 2 or 3 or 4 times your experience sometimes when you become a woman of color. When you're a woman of color that becomes a leader, because you somehow need to know more, do more, and be better. I do not center myself that way. And I center myself in the place of belonging. And that as more women of color become leaders across institutions in the United States, I think that's where we need to center ourselves, in belonging. That if we're sitting here, then we did everything to get here. We belong here, and we should operate from a belonging place, and that operate knowing that everything that we are going to do, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. That we need to understand that the environment that we're in, we might be the first to be sitting in that chair, and that we have to be conscious enough about the dynamics around us that could impact how we lead, that could impact the impact that we can have in our work, that can affect the relationships that we build in the institution. We still have to be conscious about those things. But I have a saying that I often use with leaders that I'm talking to around take space, make space. And as a new leader, or as a leader of color, is that means as a leader, take space not only means showing up, but making your presence felt, right? By raising your voice and lending your insights to every conversation and putting your stamp on how things can be done. In my conversation with women leaders and leaders of color, people were shared that they were often afraid to make decisions because of how people would, respond to those decisions, or they were afraid to take risk because sometimes they're the first person in their family to have ascended to that position, and that job is paying more money than everything that they've ever done, and that job supports, like most of us, almost everything that we do, right? So that risk taking, sometimes you're balancing what is the impact that's going to have on your ability to keep your job or to move on to another job down the road. So that's a real issue for people of color, and not just Black women, by the way. It's folks who are first timers who ascend up that ladder. So I always said, take space. I say make space because I think you have to bring other people along with you, right? Mentor new leaders, create space at the table for them, create learning opportunities for them, so that what you can do is enrich the space that you were in by creating paths for other people to come into that space, right? So that the more few that are in that space is the more normal it becomes to see people in that space. So it's like I grew up in Jamaica. Everywhere I look, there are people of color in leadership. That was normal for me. And I would say that in order to better prepare women and women of color for direct response to your question is, I think mentorship is important to have someone who is an experienced leader, to have really frank and honest conversation with who understands your strengths and your weaknesses and tendencies and can help you arrive at decisions that are right for you where you are. I think you have to engage a community like-minded leaders. This is your network. It's important to find other people like you and with common experience to support you, because I can't tell you how many times I've got my friends and we're having these what we call Black girl moments, and we're in different spaces, in different industries, having the common experience in how people are responding to us. Professional development, I think you have to continue to challenge yourself as a leader, find time to learn, and leaders must continue to grow in their own development so that they can become better leaders for the people that they're leading. Learn beyond your areas of expertise and always ask questions. It's important to put yourself in uncomfortable spaces so that, and when you're in those spaces, I often find is when you begin to ask different questions. And it's often too when you begin to have these kind of breakout moments because you're outside of your comfort zone and you're really able to deal with some of the challenging things that comes to you in those spaces. So that would be in preparation for 2060, as they say, mentorship, going to build pipelines. And the one thing that we have to look at, Larry, and I want to end with this, is that even if Black women become the majority, I don't know if we become the majority in the C-suites. Like there might be a lot of us available to become majority in C-suite, but who is doing the hiring and the promotion? And that you have to look at hiring and promotion practices. There's a slew of articles of Black folks and Black women leaving corporate America in large numbers. They don't stay as long because of the microaggression and behavior that often happen, unsupported. They feel unsupported and they just feel like they have to keep proving themselves over and over and over again. So I think that, it's not only that we will become this, majority in what leadership might look like, the environment and culture in the places where we're going to be working, those have to change. And we will need to have enough power to influence that behavioral change in those institutions. One of us or two of us often doesn't make it happen because we still don't have the power to do that. And so I think that's critically important that we're in the places where we can, and in the positions where we can influence cultural change in the institution. If we can do that, then we can make some progress towards better experience being leaders of color and being women leaders in the workplace.
Awesome. I love that. And I know everyone, we're coming close on time. I can have this conversation with Tony and Marjorie all day, but I will end with the final question. And I want to also give you an opportunity to ask any questions. So if you have a question, if you can use the Q&A section to do that, that will be greatly appreciated. So Tony, we talk about belonging, and Marjorie has really talked a lot about belonging. And I want to, really pivot to more of, as a father, right? You're father of two male scholars and leaders. You have an amazing Black male initiative at Borough Manhattan Community College. When you think about this moment where we are, what's happening, and you think about the future that our men of color will experience, what gives you possible apprehension or pause regarding their adulthood, but also what makes you optimistic?
Thank you for that. My two babies are 9 and 12, and they are my heartbeats. They are why I do what I do. I am very intentional about letting them know and see what I do. They've been to my office. My youngest created door signs with his name and his brother's name on it. And he wrote co-presidents, that they are the co-presidents and that their job is to take care of daddy. We start each morning by me asking them, what are your intentions for today? And we end the day by asking them, what were your roses and what were your thorns from today, and what have you learned? And every day when they talk about their intentions, they always end with, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so it is very important for me to help them understand that they can be whomever and whatever they want to be. And daddy will always love you, no matter what. But to be your authentic self, to pursue your dreams and your aspirations, and to be a good person. And so when I transitioned that to the work that we're doing at BMCC, Borough of Manhattan Community College, with our Black Male Initiative, we call it UMLA, Urban Male Leadership Academy. By the way, our UMLA program, about 25, 26, 30% are women. But our program, as many do, has a long history and a focus on creating a safe space, strong communities, academic and educational support, and creating an environment and a culture of care and belonging. We are very much committed to ensuring that my brothers, my sons, my cousins, my friends, my family get the support and the guidance necessary for them to achieve their greatest potential. For years, CUNY has taken many of the practices and the lessons learned from programs like Black Male Initiative, My Brother's Keeper, et cetera, to enhance and support our Black and Hispanic boys and men across the city. We know that there is a cradle to prison pipeline, thanks to Miriam Wright Edelman and the Children's Defense Fund. And so we recognize that we have to do something about it. And so we've created a cohort model, which really focuses on helping our students, particularly those in the UMLA program, have a sense of belonging, and they too can accomplish great things. And so what are those great things that they've accomplished? Membership in cohort programs at BMCC increases graduation by 227%. Okay. 40% of new BMCC students are in a cohort program. The 3-year graduation for students in cohort programs are 48% higher. College retention increased to the highest percent in 6 years in fall of 2022. This is all during the pandemic. And of particular note is that Black male retention increased by nearly 25%. Hispanic male retention increased by nearly 30%. 40% of the overall retention was due to Black and Hispanic men, who account for 30% of our student population. So they're doing it. Black male retention was higher than BMCC's institutional rate. So basically, and more importantly, Black men pulled the college's retention rate up. If you're in the UMLA program at BMCC, you're 4 times more likely to graduate, if not in a cohort. If you're a Hispanic male in UMLA, you're 4 times more likely to graduate. So when we talk about the value of programs like UMLA, if you want to put on your business hat, it makes a whole lot of sense because the return on investment is significant because there are far more students that are persisting and completing because of programs like UMLA. So I'm encouraged when I think about my sons and their future and the students that we have the honor and the privilege of serving as their academic home.
Thank you so much. So we're going to do a quick fast round here. So there are a couple of questions. So the first question by Sunil is, what are your thoughts on the best method to help build deeper pipelines to grow future leaders of color within our institutions? Who wants to take it?
Is this Dr. Sunil Gupta?
Yes.
All right. Marjorie, you want to go first?
You know, in the nonprofit sector where I am, we have a lot of leadership development programs. It feels like every week we have a new one that comes in line. And there's some really good ones in the core leadership programs. See a lot of people of color in those cohort models. Many of whom actually, I didn't do core, but I track it over the years. Many of those leaders go on to lead institutions. So I feel like they're doing a really good job. But you know, a lot of the colleges have leadership programs. A lot of Black and brown folks are in those programs as well. I think I have to go back to what I said earlier, is that in any institution or in any set of institution, you know, you first have to recognize and acknowledge that you are lacking something or missing this line of leadership in your institution. You have to place value on leadership in your institution by people of color. And if you place value in that, then you become more intentional about how you're recruiting, how you are developing, how you are mentoring, and how you're making sure that they're having access to promotion, structural promotion, but also income that helps them in their own economic conditions. So I think in the nonprofit sector is robust. There are lots and lots and lots of programs. I do still think, and this is my opinion, of course, that there could be more leaders of color leading some of our larger institutions in New York City. But we've made some progress, and I'm not, you know, completely happy, but I'm pleased with the progress that I'm seeing. And, you know, Larry came to Guttman. It's exciting to see him there. Anthony's exciting to see where you are. I think our jobs as leaders is that we cannot be too busy to help mentor the next generation of leaders and help to create the pathways and access for them that they don't have.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a question from one of our students. And the question is, what are some tips and advice you would give to the younger generation that you wish you would have taken advantage of?
Anthony?
Don't rule yourself out. Don't disqualify yourself. All too often I hear, you'll never get that. You'll never be that. Don't listen to that noise. Don't listen to that distraction. Don't listen to the haters, but, you know, give it your all and leave it on the field and take advantage of every single opportunity that you can. There's something to learn from every single opportunity and every single person that you interact with.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, everyone, we are almost at time. We're at 1 o'clock. We have a hard stop, but please join me in just congratulating and thanking these two dynamic leaders for participating in the session today. And for all of you that posed questions, thank you as well. This session again was entitled We Wear the Mask. We Wear the Mask and Champions for Social Justice. And the work that we do, it is certainly work that we do because we have a passion for it and we have a heart for it. So I encourage you, if you would like to reach out to any one of these leaders, they are found on LinkedIn. That's Tony Munroe, Anthony Munroe, and also Marjorie Parker. They talked about mentorship. They talked about just connecting, and LinkedIn is one of those professional networks. So if your question wasn't answered, I encourage you to reach out to them there. Thank you to all of my Guttman Community College family for your being here today. And as you always hear me say, the best is still yet to come. Take care and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.